I certainly appreciate you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing members to speak out on what, for many of us, may be one of the most important votes that we are asked to cast in our congressional careers. On the one hand, we may have financial peril. On the other hand, we may have taxpayer bankruptcy for the next generation, and many of us view a slippery slope to socialism where the fundamental role of the federal government in a free enterprise economy is irrevocably changed. People who thought that such a profound decision would be made in 72 hours were simply naive. I believe there is at least broad agreement on both sides of the aisle that although we hear the term crisis on a daily basis in this institution, this one is for real. Inaction is not an option. However, the Paulson Plan is not the only option that should be on the table. I feel quite confident that the leaders of our party, the President of the United States, the two presidential nominees, can go to the American public and say, members of Congress will work this out. It's not a matter that has to be undertaken in a matter of hours. It is a matter that does need to be taken up in a matter of days to weeks. I believe, Mr. Chairman, that there are a number of options that should be considered by this committee and by other committees, and we should certainly look to history as our guide. Some say that the taxpayer may actually gain in this transaction. And you know what, Mr. Chairman? That may be true. I can put a gun to my neighbor's head, take his college fund for his children, place a bet on a roulette table in Las Vegas, and maybe I'll triple his money. But, Mr. Chairman, that is not a risk that my neighbor voluntarily undertook. This is not a risk that the taxpayer wishes to voluntarily undertake. Now, it is not a perfect parallel, Mr. Chairman, but when we look at the model of the Resolution Trust Corporation and the S&L debacle of the 80s, I just had a conversation in Budget Committee with CBO Director Orzag, and he said that did cost the taxpayer $150 to $200 billion. So at least the most recent historic precedent says that we could have quite a challenge. I think there are two main challenges that we're facing as we see our credit market seizing, and I will say that anybody who tells you they have the answer today is probably either naive or disingenuous. But on a bipartisan basis, we had better find it and find it fast. But I do think there is a huge psychological component to the panic in our markets and a huge challenge in having illiquid markets as well. House conservatives have put forth alternatives that we believe should be debated, that we believe should be on the table. We are not naive about who controls the institution. But we believe that if you would have a temporary suspension of the capital gains tax, that you would have as much as $1 trillion of liquidity that could come into the market, that could come and help supply needed funds for our financial institutions and, more importantly, to help struggling homeowners stay in their home. In addition, Mr. Chairman, again, not necessarily within the purview of this committee, but many view the mark-to-market rule that was imposed, I believe, in 1993, that serves us well in normal times, has a pro-cyclical tendency to lead us to perhaps the irrational exuberance of the dot-com bubble, but can also lead to a credit crunch death spiral that we are seeing today. And House conservatives have called for a suspension of the mark-to-market rule as well. We believe that other options have to be looked at. I know this committee will debate it. Many of us believe if you peel away the layers of the onion, that none of this would have happened but for Fannie and Freddie. And until you deal with the root cause of the problem, you have not dealt with the problem. So I have legislation that I've introduced that ultimately will take away the monopoly powers of Fannie and Freddie. And certainly, and last but not least, and I'll wrap up, Mr. Chairman, there are options that would have secured loans by the taxpayers that I believe is probably a preferable option that needs to be explored as well. And my final comment, since I like to have on the record the few times that I might actually agree with my friend from California, I would like to say House conservatives are in total agreement that if the taxpayer is going to be asked to bail out these Wall Street firms, compensation limits absolutely, positively, unequivocally have to be a part of the equation. With that, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you giving me this opportunity, and I yield back my time.